If you want to know which is the best small outboard, I will tell you that in the power range of 2 to 2.5 horsepower, the best engine is the Suzuki DF 2.5. If we extend the power range up to 3.5 horsepower, the best outboard is the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5, which are exactly the same outboard, changing only the brand. On the other hand, the worst outboard are the Mercury and Tohatsu 2.5, which, ironically enough, are the same engine that the 3.5 horsepower version, but limiting their power make them the least attractive option. If you want to know how I came to this conclusion and see the comparison of this and other outboards, continue watching the video, because there are some other curiosities. For this video I have compared the following outboards: the Honda BF 2.3, the Suzuki DF 2.5, the Yamaha F 2.5, the Mercury and Tohatsu 2.5 and 3.5, the Selva Guppy 2.5, and finally the Parsun F 2.6. Let's take a quick look at the characteristics of the outboards on the screen. Although many say 2.5 horsepower on their casing, we can see that they are slightly below the 1.86 kilowatts, equivalent to 2.5 horsepower. Now let's look at the weight of these outboards. If we order the engine from the lightest to heaviest, we see that the Honda, Suzuki and Selva are by far the lightest. But to compare these outboards with different powers, we must look at the power-to-weight ratio. If we look at the table with the power-to-weight ratio data, we see that the ranking has completely changed, with the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5 topping the list with the power-to-weight ratio of 0.141 kilowatts per kilogram, followed by the Selva with the 0.136 kilowatts per kilogram, and Suzuki with the 0.133 kilowatts per kilogram, which leads the ranking among the outboards with the 2 to 2.6 horsepower. On the other hand, at the bottom of the table are the Mercury and Tohatsu 2.5. The power-limited version of its 3.5 horsepower big brother is handicapped by its 41 pounds of weight. However, they are not far behind the Yamaha F 2.5. Now let's get into performance of these outboards. Although I have not used it to compare different outboards, I have calculated the torque of these engines, as I think it may be interesting information for some of you. To estimate the torque, I used the following equation, isolating the torque and having the power and the revolutions at which they develop their nominal power. I have obtained the torque in Newton meters. Let's take a quick look at the results. Looking at the table, we see that the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5 are again leading the ranking, which is expected since they have more power than the rest. The Selva also leads the ranking in the 2 to 2.6 horsepower range, followed closely by the 2.5 Mercury and Tohatsu. In this occasion, the Honda is at the bottom of the ranking. You have to keep in mind that it is the least powerful. Finally, notice that the Suzuki and Yamaha generate the same torque. Later, I will analyze it deeply. Let's move on to parameters that I use to compare the performance of these outboards. I have calculated the brake main effective pressure to compare these engines, considering that they are all carbureted 4-stroke single-cylinder and gasoline engines. This parameter tells us the average effective pressure in the combustion chamber with which the piston is pushed. In other words, the average mean pressure, which if applied to the piston heads uniformly from the top to the bottom of each power stroke, will produce the braking power output measured on the crankshaft. The mean effective pressure tells us how easily an engine produces torque and function of this displacement. This parameter is very effective to comparing engines' performance with the other engines with similar characteristics. If we look at the table with the results, we see two sides of the same coin again, with the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5 leading with the best result, and the Mercury and Tohatsu 2.5 with the lowest pressure. On the other hand, the Honda BF 2.3 obtained an excellent result, which has a value very closely with the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5. being a highly optimized engine. In the following table, with more parameters to compare, we can see how the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5 have the highest brake mean effective pressure and the highest torque, being the most powerful engine. In contrast, the version with less power obtained a very low pressure, which doesn't take advantage of this engine block potential with 85.5 cubic centimeters. The Honda gets a fantastic brake mean effective pressure with its low displacement, although it has a low torque and is the least powerful. Before, we had seen that in theory the Suzuki and the Yamaha generate the same torque with the same power and revolutions, but here we can see that the Suzuki achieved this with 68.7 cubic centimeters, while the Yamaha reached it with 72.5 cubic centimeters. Therefore, the Suzuki has a better brake mean effective pressure, so the Suzuki is a more efficient engine in terms of performance. The next thing was to compare the fuel consumption data. Some manufacturers give the fuel consumption for the outboards working in the wide open throttle. Others do not, so I had to do a lot of research to find this fuel consumption data. we can see that the Selva is the outboard that consumes the least fuel, while the Mercury and the Tohatsu 3.5 are the outboards that consume the most fuel. On the other hand, we see that the Honda, Suzuki and the 2.5 horsepower Tohatsu and Mercury have the same fuel consumption. These engines have different powers, and to know which is the most efficient, the interesting thing is to calculate the specific fuel consumption. That is, the amount of fuel consumed per unit of power produced by the engine. In the following table, we see the consumptions in liters per kilowatt hour and US gallon per kilowatt hour. That is, how many liters or gallons of fuel the engine needs to generate 1 kilowatt for 1 hour. The table shows that the tie between the Honda, Suzuki and the 2.5 horsepower Tohatsu and Mercury is broken. The Selva maintains the leadership, being the one that consumes least, followed by the Mercury and Tohatsu 2.5. We can also observe that the Parsun F2.6 is the outboard that consumes the greatest amount of fuel to produce 1 kilowatt. In the following section, I have compared the noise value of each outboard provided by the manufacturers. In theory, the Suzuki DF 2.5 is the quietest, with a big difference from other outboards. The noisiest is the Honda, due to its air cooling system. Also surprising is the Selva, which is in the penultimate position due to its high noise level. Considering the power-to-weight ratio, brake mean effective pressure, consumption per kilowatt hour, and noise, I have obtained the following ranking. In it, we can see that the best outboard in the 2 to 3.5 horsepower range are the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5, with 22 points. It's followed very closely by the Suzuki DF 2.5 with 21 points. So the Suzuki is the best choice if we want an outboard with the 2 to 2.5 horsepower. In theory, the worst option are the 2.5 horsepower Mercury and Tohatsu, and it's curious to see how the same engine that leads the table occupies the last position of the ranking by reducing its power. We can also observe that there is a tie between the Honda, Yamaha and Parsun, and the Selva, the small Italian outboard, is in third position. But my analysis did not end here. I considered to incorporate a warranty into the comparison, but the fact that the manufacturers offer different warranty periods for the same engine, depending on the country where it's sold and the use, made it impossible to give coherence to the comparison. Something similar happened with the price. The price varied a lot depending on the country where it was sold and the seller, even finding variations of $2,000 and $3,000 in the price for certain outboard models. But in this case, I decided to add the price as an additional comparison factor, averaging the price I found online for the United States and Europe, and this is the result. For both Europe and United States, the Parsun is the cheapest outboard, followed by the Suzuki and the Selva. Moving the results to the general ranking, we can see that in both cases the Suzuki goes from the second to the first position, and we have already seen that this is an excellent outboard. The Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5 lost several positions as they are more expensive. The Mercury 3.5 is being better positioned than the Tohatsu, and we can also observe that there are variations in the last positions of the ranking. At this point, you may think that everything has already said. It occurred to me that this may not be the right way to add the price variable to overall ranking to score the different outboards. And although that, if I had calculated and considered the weight and fuel consumption as function of power, why wouldn't I calculate the price as function of power? And what is the price per kilowatt of these outboards? So I calculated how much each kilowatt of each outboard costs, and these are the results. The Chinese Parsun is still the cheapest. The Mercury 3.5 occupies the second position and has an excellent price per kilowatt. In Europe, the Suzuki almost equaled the Mercury in price per kilowatt, while in the US market, it exchanged the third place with the Tohatsu 3.5. When these data are transferred to the overall ranking, the Mercury 3.5 ranked first for the US and European market. The Tohatsu 3.5 ranked second in the US market, and the Suzuki 2.5 ranked third. They tied with 28 points in the European market and occupied the second position. Finally, let's take a general look to the different rankings. We can also see how the Suzuki 2.5, the Mercury and Tohatsu 3.5 are always at the top of the rankings. So that's it. If you liked the video, please subscribe. In a post in Nautimundo website, you will find an article of this video with different data and rankings. Thank you very much for watching the video.